So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of the sealed standards that came with the instrument. These are the two tubes that are normally in the drawer here. So for the first time that I come in to set the instrument up for the day, what I really want to do is check to see, because this is so temperature sensitive, I want to be able to see where our reference TMS, tetramethylsilane, normally that is always set at 0 part per million. So what we want to do is run these standard samples just for the first time in the day to make sure that the TMS peak is essentially really close to that 0 part per million range. So we can use this as a chance to demonstrate that procedure, and basically at the same time, how you would normally get a sample down in the instrument. So, and it doesn't matter which one we use, they both have TMS, so I'll choose N-propyl benzoate. I'll try that one. So open this up, and you can see that we have a sealed, and that sort of shows you approximately 1 inch. This has maybe a close to 2 inch. The minimal amount is somewhere around the 1 inch, and we'll cover that later. So you get your spinner, and you slide it in, just like that. Very similar to the thermometers on the top of a distillation head, how you have that rubber O-ring for a thermometer. This is very much the same. So what you do is, and now I'm going to have to switch this so we can see it. Forgive me. Boy, that's I'll show you right there. Forgive me for the cinematography. What we want to do, and normally you get a new Kim white, very important, or we usually leave a Kim white sitting right there and we trap it in the door so everybody knows, yes, I'm going to use a Kim white. This is the depth gauge. So for instance, let's say I loaded it this way. When you gently let it sit, you can see how this spinner has to be pushed down. So that is the proper depth. Now notice how I'm holding the glass on the top. Try not to hold the spinner, because when you get the oils off your fingers around this white spinner, it can accumulate in the probe over time. Hence with the Kim white, you hold it on the top. With the Kim white, you can just wipe this down as best as possible to remove any oils off our fingers or debris. And then what we'll do is you have to make sure that the pump on the floor is turned on. We already covered that earlier. There's a little switch on the back. Right? So we'll turn that pump on, which gets the air flowing, and now what I'll do, if the spinning switch is with spin on, it's automatically going to float. So now that I got two hands free, I can show you this. All right, here we go. Okay, so you can see there, that thing is floating right there on the top. And the idea is this. You see those black magic marker lines on the top? See those black magic marker lines? You want to keep your eye on this. So notice how I'm going to have my left hand right here, literally on the control, so that I can turn the spin off or put it back on. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to lift this lever so it goes up, okay? But I want to keep my eye on those black magic marker lines. So I flip it up, oh, and it goes all the way down. Now we can't quite make it out on this camera, but with your eye, and I'm looking down right now, I'm going to turn this switch back on, but my eyes are locked on those black magic marker lines, and this one did not turn on spinning, which happens every once in a while. So when you see that it's not spinning, there's a couple of tricks here. What I'm going to try first is, with this eject button, I'm ever so lightly just going to nudge it a little. And what it does is it raises the sample up. Still can't quite see it. It raises it up a little bit. But I'm going to try and get this thing spinning here. And I think this time, absolutely. So the trick is this. If this thing does not start spinning when it's at the bottom, you can either eject it, readjust the spinner, rewipe it, or when it's all the way down at the bottom, and this is the next thing I really wanted to go over right now. If I was to use this as an example, okay, if I can get this to stand, okay, So let's say that this is the probe, okay? So when you have your NMR tube floating near the top in a spinner, it will be floating near the top, kind of like that. And if you wanted it to drop all the way to the bottom and sit, and then turn it on spinning, what's interesting is, if you hit the eject button ever so slightly and you raise it up only about 2 inches, it doesn't come all the way back up to the top, right? So sometimes it's not so obvious. Instead of being bottomed out where it should be, it can be sitting right about here. And if the spin is on, it'll start spinning very slowly, but it is spinning. So I used to think, oh, what's wrong? Well, the trick is, you have to have it properly sitting all the way at the bottom and then turn the spin on. Otherwise, your sample will not be appropriately aligned in the probe, okay? So you play around with it, do whatever it takes that when it hits bottom, it does successfully spin. Once you have that, great, all is good. We'll close the lid and then we'll sit down at the instrument here. So I'll walk you through what we got. So first thing, you want to click on down here, NMR versus AII. Okay, the NMR runs what they call the nuts, and you can see that. They call it the nuts software, it's the way it is. AII, I call this the blue interface, which is the interface with the NMR instrument, okay? And you can see here on the bottom menu, things like the number of scans, the receiver gain, relaxation, delay. Are you running 1-dimension normal scans, or are you running 2-dimensional NMR, things like that. What's very important too is the field offset, and I'll show you that shortly. The prompt is right down here, okay, H1, and that is where when you type in the commands, you're gonna see what you have. So what we're gonna do is, this is a standard we run in the morning. We wanna check our field offset. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm simply gonna type in shim. I don't care if you run a sample of any type. When in doubt, you always want to shim it first. So you hit enter, and up comes this, enter relaxation delay. In the top corner, there's some nice information. I mean, you can always read it if you're not sure and it prompts you. But for our purposes, normally what they're saying here is you can type in 2 or 5 is the norm. I normally always just type in 2. For years now, it's worked very well. You hit enter. You get a different square box in the top right. The rule of thumb is, when that square box goes away, whatever you asked it to do, it's done. So right now it's shimming, and you'll know when it's done when that box goes away. And right now in the midst of shimming, you see what looks like more or less an FID type thing. On the keyboard, if you hit Control S, it will toggle between the FID view and this, as you can, that's the spectra. So it's almost as if the Fourier transform has been done, okay? So that's the spectra view, and if I hit Control S again, it goes back to the FID, free induction decay. So most students, I mean, they do like to sort of look at what's getting scanned right now, what its spectra. And I'm already, the fact that I see this on screen, this is good. You see the peak to the far right? That little singlet there should be our TMS peak. So the purposes of this opening in the day is to make sure that our TMS peak, because of the temperature on the day of this instrument, is approximately near 0, okay? So normally the shimming takes about 1 to 2 minutes. On the odd occasion, for whatever reason, sometimes it'll be like 5 minutes. So now it says written file disappears. So we're good, it's done shimming. When you're done shimming, all that does is try to make the magnetic field for your sample in the instrument as uniform as possible. So that's done, gives you good spectra. So now we want to take what it says here, number of scans. It's automatically set to run 1. For concentrated samples, 1 scan is more than enough, even if it's 5 mole%. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to type in ZG. That stands for 0 go. You hit enter. Up comes, how do you want to save this? Because I'm running a default standard for the morning, okay? It's automatically suggesting it's going to save it as PNMR FID. So I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to hit enter. So now it's going to do 1 scan, okay, which takes about maybe 15 seconds, and you'll see the result pop up here. And of course, the square box, we know that it's done scanning when it goes away. Great. So we can already see it looks pretty good. This has acquired the sample. Now we're going to go to the nuts software, click on that. Normally it comes up saying, you know, this is the license disclaimer. So we're just gonna click on OK. When you're running, the first looking for the 0 TMS peak standard run of the morning. We're not even saving it as a fancy name. We just leave it as the default name. There's a quick command to make this go fast. And you can see that in this software, there's a prompt line down here as well. I'm gonna type in A2. Notice how it automatically, as soon as I finish the number 2, I hit A and 2, I don't hit enter, boom, automatically does it. It's an automatic fast thing so that we can do this morning routine. And all I'm doing is I'm looking at this spectrum and saying, wow, I get some very nice looking sharp peaks. And lo and behold, I see the TMS peak right here. You can grab this square box and you can lower the intensity of this if you want. Now, if we wanted to make this a little better, this is what I'm gonna do. You left mouse button click and hold on the top of that. And I go down here and I see that the reading at the moment is minus 0.97, okay? Now we're off by 1, so I'll make a correction on this. So you go back to the blue interface, and down here you say FO, which is field offset, enter, and this pops up. Enter in what the current position is. We just do it with TMS if we can see it because we know it's supposed to be 0. But it doesn't matter what peak you pick. If you know the number it should be, you could do the same thing. But for this one, the current position is minus 0.97. So I hit OK. Now it says, what should it be at? Enter the desired. So it should be at 0. OK. And just to finish this check, we're going to go through the same thing. I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to say 0 go. We've already shimmed it and it's still in the instrument, so that's fine. And if you don't take it out, you don't have to reshim it. I'm gonna hit 0 go. It's gonna ask, how do you wanna save this? I'm gonna leave it as the default so I can make this quicker. It's gonna take its single scan. And then that window's gonna disappear when it's done. I think it takes about 15 seconds or so. That's great. So now we're gonna go right back into the NMR window. Now notice, this is the old one, right? Notice how the TMS peak is almost minus 1 part per million. When I type in here again, A, as soon as I hit 2, it's gonna automatically switch this over. So I'm gonna hit 2, bing. See how much closer to 0 it now becomes? The command A2, what it does is it automatically processes the very last acquired in your blue interface software. It'll automatically does the Fourier transform, then runs a macro on it and boom, spits it out. So this is where in the morning, as soon as I see this, it's almost right over top 0. I think this is great, we're done. So we're done with this setting the field offset. Okay, so you can close that if I want. I don't want to save it because it doesn't mean anything to me. Nope, fine. So now, I'll just show you the eject. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and, I need an extra pair of hands, don't I? If I set it right here, let's see. So we're going to see, I'm going to put my hand, okay, I'm going to put my hand right like this. See how my hand's kind of over top of it? And then I'm going to hit that eject button. Let's see if we can pick it up here. See how it shot right up into my hand? And as long as I'm holding the eject button, it's going to hold it there. So then we're good. We take out our sample, right? Take out our sample, we're holding it. And the other thing too is, before I end this segment, you normally always bring a piece of glassware like this, an Erlenmeyer flask, so that you can gently have an NMR tube sitting in it. It's a lot easier to walk around with this and set it down. What you don't want to do, if this is your sample, for instance, you don't want to walk in here, you don't, oops, or do that. You see how absent-minded that can be, which is also good for people to see this mess. You don't want to leave it down there like that. So the best thing to do is always have it sitting in a nice Erlenmeyer or something like that, and then you can walk around with it, okay?